Nearly on, I'm hoping so.
Okay, there we go.
Fantastic. Well, off we go. Final panel of the day. Let's make sure that we end with some energy, right? Whoa, come on, everybody.
Woo!
So yes, woo, exactly. That's it, Vicky. Are you going to give us a woo as well, James?
I can do. Woo!
Woo, there we go. Exactly. We've done the woo.
I needed it after today.
Look, we've all needed it at the moment. So thank you so much for the energy that you brought to this. But yes, this is the Essential Tech panel. So we're going to be finding out about essential tech. But before we do that, let's go and get our panelists introduced. I'm going to go first. I'm George Osborn. I'm the head of communications at Ukie. And we're going to go to James now. James, what's going on?
Hey everyone, I'm the Managing Director of Sharkmob London. Sharkmob is a new studio in the UK, founded last September, but have big aspirations to grow into quite a sizable AAA developer here in London. But very, very early on in that journey, as I say, we've been running since last September, so currently a team of 15 people.
Fantastic. And Vicky?
Hi, yeah, I'm Vicky Potts from Whitepot Studios. We're an indie game dev studio based over in Belfast. Normally we'd be in a co-working space called the Pixel Mill, but alas, we're there in virtual spirit for now. But yeah, we make some of our own IP games and games for clouds across a number of platforms.
Fantastic, and thank you, Jamie Bankhead, for also chucking a woo into the comments. It's very nice to see that the chat is getting similarly animated. So I'm going to open up with what's quite a broad and possibly lazy question from me, which is, what do we actually mean when we're talking about essential tech? Because I think when it comes to games, we can have quite different definitions, can't we,
Yeah.
Vicky? Yeah, I'm going to go Vicky first.
Yeah, so I think anything that would help the day-to-day running of the studio, and I was asking my team, I was like, what do you say is essential? And the first thing I was just like straight up like Google Sheets. I need the Google Drive, we need the Discord to talk to each other. And then the developers in my team were saying, well, we can't do without ReSharper. I don't know how to code without ReSharper. So yeah, it very much depends on if you're looking at the production side of things or the development side of things, or even just from an art pipeline side of things. So I would say things that you use every day and things that automate stuff. That's what I would say are essential.
Everyday use and automation. And James, sorry, I did interrupt you there, just as you were about to come in with a scintillating point. So what were you going to say?
I was just agreeing with you there that I think everybody does have a different definition. And I'd argue, I think that there is very little universal definition of essential tech for a reason, because I think, as Vicky was saying, I think it depends on what you're doing and the team that you have and what you're trying to achieve. I think every games company has some essential requirements around kind of basic hardware, communication tools, source control, things like that. But beyond that, I do really think it's project and team dependent. Yes,
of course. And I think as well, it seems to be what you're trying to do and where you are in the process, because obviously, James, you're in the process of setting something up, and
indeed, yeah.
Like you say, you're aiming for the stars, so that's going to be changing perhaps your perception of what's going to be essential for you. So what kind of things have you been adding to the way that you work into that kind of category of what's proving essential?
Yeah, so as you say, we're really, really early stages. So what's most important for us right now is finding the right creative concept or finding the fun in any idea that we have. So for most of us, I think if we were sat in a studio right now, the most essential piece of technology we would have would be a Post-it note. As we're exploring things and we're trying to identify what we want to do, at some point and very quickly, we want to start putting that into code. We want to start building something to kind of feel out how this game concept is working. And at that point, I'd be looking at game engines, Unreal, Unity as potential essential tech, depending on what we're prototyping or what we're looking to build, as that will allow us to start, say, finding the fun and testing the concept as quickly as possible without burdening ourselves with too much kind of technology overhead. And so you're right, as you progress through the development process, your essential tech changes, and the tech that you find essential to the team is what's helping you get the best bang for buck, what's helping you deliver the best experience, or answering the questions you need to answer at that time in the most cost-effective way. And I'd say for us right now, it would be the Post-it note, but I'd say right now it's Zoom.
The Post-it note and humble Zoom. These are pieces of technology. I mean, I've got a whiteboard sitting in front of me. That's not a piece of technology, but that still feels very essential to me. So, hey, it can take many forms. But one of the questions I wanted to ask is a bit of a follow-up as well to Vicky, because you've obviously sort of a bit further down the line in terms of you've got an established team and you're working. how do you actually work out that the piece of technology that you think is essential tech is actually going to be the one that works for you? Because there's so many options out there. Like people were talking about Google Sheets, and I was thinking, well, we actually use a load of Microsoft and OneDrive, and it's like completely different infrastructure. So is there a process for working out what's the best bit of tech for you? Or is it the case of we take a leap and see where we end up?
We have previously taken a leap, and it generally tends to be me saying, hey, we need a new way to manage all our tasks. Let's do Trello. And then, oh, here, actually, I think Hack and Plan might be better. And then you put all your stuff into that and you realize 2 weeks later, it's not working. We're going to just go up to Jira now. So after a few bumps in the road with deciding process, like the best sort of way to proceed with that, we sort of have a process now of like, is this user friendly? Am I going to get sick of using this in 2 weeks? Can I import and export stuff easily from it? Because I think Hack and Plan we used a bit for just our general planning and sort of production overview and our tasks, and we were able to export everything out of that quite easily once we were done with it and import it into Jira instead, which is sort of like Trello on steroids. But from a development point of view, you can link stuff into it. So now instead of just jumping in, I would say I'm actually going to stick with this. Is it portable, the data, and is the cost of the time and effort of me setting this up actually worse than me maybe doing this thing manually instead, or sticking with the current system we're using? So yeah, just sort of like weighing up the benefit and risk as well.
So I was just going to sort of frame that towards James. So when we're talking about essential tech, we're not just talking about, I need a piece of technology to solve this problem.
Yeah.
We're also saying that I need a technology that's actually going to support this process in the business.
Yeah, I'd say so. I mean, Vicky mentioned tools like Jira there. That's very much a tool to support a process within the business. And so I think essential tech right now, covers the whole gamut of building games from a process and a tech point of view. We're probably focusing more right now in COVID world on those process tools and technologies and what can help us now we're all sat working from home.
Well, exactly. And I was actually going to get onto a bit of a question there about the COVID world and asking about what those tools and technologies are that you've found essential. Because I think, it's obviously very good to talk in the abstract, but let's go deeper into it. Which bits and pieces of tech have been most helping you keep on top of everything in the COVID world? I'm going to jump back to Vicky for this again.
Definitely Discord. We were using Discord for our sort of internal team stuff before COVID, and then COVID happened and we already had sort of work from home days and that sort of thing. I felt we were quite fortunate in that we were able to sort of fall into a routine quite quickly. And especially for things like a daily stand up and a daily wrap up and then a weekly planning meeting. I've sort of set up webhooks from calendars to Discord to actually just be like, oh, here you have a stand up in 15 minutes, as opposed to used to just literally stand up at the table, trying to sort of mimic those real life interactions. We used to have like a little Discord room each that we would sort of sit in like an office, but we decided that was too, you're just sitting there waiting for someone to come into your virtual office all day. So we have a situation room, that voice chat that we jump into, and then like a coffee break kitchen that we jump into, so that way we can still kind of have those normal inane office chats. And I know that in terms of like actual game development and output, that's not super relevant, but just the sort of trying to emulate that like fun office environment that you used to have, that's been really essential for us.
But it's also a really interesting point, because one of the things when we did our research for our Playing On report last July, which was looking at how studios had adapted to COVID, was that people were saying they missed those spaces where you would bounce ideas off, or the 5 minutes at the end of a meeting where you would come out and just go, can I just grab you for a second? I just need you to go and look at this thing. And then you would have someone look at it for 5 minutes and carry on. But in the COVID world, that kind of interaction's proven quite difficult to replicate. So, I mean, James, as well, to pose that similar question to you, you mentioned Zoom as kind of a central pillar to what you're doing.
Yeah.
I mean, how has that been integrated into what you're doing? What else have you been chucking into the
Yeah,
mix?
I'm going to say I love Vicky's idea. I'm going to steal it and make sure we have those kind of coffee room chats. We are using Slack and Zoom a heck of a lot. Slack for kind of the usual text chat, Zoom for kind of having calls. The other piece of software that we found really beneficial at this kind of early stage of development is a piece of technology called Miro, which is essentially kind of an online collaborative whiteboarding tool. I think the biggest thing we have genuinely missed leaving the office is, say, being sat around a whiteboard, being able to chuck things up on a wall and wipe things out and kind of iterate on ideas really quickly. And Miro is the best thing we've found so far to help us do that remotely. Still not quite the same as having that physical presence, but it's helping a lot.
That's very, very interesting. And again, it's also very nice to hear that the cross-pollination of ideas is happening right in front of us. And by cross-pollination, I mean shameless stealing, because I'm stealing it as well. I actually wrote down Discord coffee chat. Let's do that, which is fantastic. The other question that I had in relation to essential technology and COVID was, has COVID made you think twice about the tools that you have actually been using to do the job previously in terms of development itself? Because, you know, again, I'm speaking as someone who's not a developer, but I'm saying there have been times when I've realized that the way that I did my job has had to change completely as a result of being online and sitting here and not necessarily being able to go out and, say, meet people on a day-to-day basis as I do. So have there been times where you've looked at a piece of software that you're using and gone, actually, maybe I could have been looking for an alternative that works more effectively in the COVID world? Or what do you think about that? I'm just throwing it out there.
It's a good question.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of just we've hit hiccups with things like maybe back in the day, if we had like a source control issue, like someone was having a weird GitHub error was being thrown up, it was much easier for someone just to sit and just bash away for 2 minutes trying to work out what the problem is and remedy it. It's a bit harder to do that unless you've got like remote desktop stuff set up right away. So almost a way to sort of emulate that sort of old, like, oh, I've got a problem, come over and look at this for 2 seconds, because you can screen share and stuff, but it's not the same. So I think, yeah, trying to emulate that almost like when you sit down, you try something out. I miss that kind of sort of office interaction. Trying to think how, you know, what would actually need to change in the current processes to enable that, and it would just be better remote desktop stuff.
Yeah, and so and in some of those cases, I mean, arguably the truth is just maybe you're never going to quite get the same interaction ever, because even with better remote desktop things, it's not quite the same thing as someone sitting there in front of you going, look at this thing here.
Yeah.
Why is this not working? I mean, James, is that reflective at all in your experience?
It is. I think most things are more difficult remotely, but I'd say the move to remote working over the past year, if anything, has just made us much better at doing this. And I'm conscious that even when the world returns to normal, there are always going to be situations and cases where people have to work or communicate remotely. And I think we will translate some practices across into our future way of working that just means we're more efficient regardless of whether we're in the building or out of the building. And I think that's both from a process point of view, but also the tools and technologies we've set up at home. I think most people are now better suited to sit at home and do some work than they were probably 18 months ago.
Yeah, completely. And I mean, again, you know, not game development here at Ukie per se, but us shifting entirely to a remote setup means that I think when we're doing things like hopefully going back to the normal day-to-day work and visiting lots of hubs and going all over the place, you're just going to have a team that's going to be much, much better set up to work wherever we are in the world, which,
indeed,
you know, we were pretty good at before, but I think we're probably perfectly set for it now. So I was also going to ask a little bit of a question there as well around that kind of return to work, or that idea of returning to the office. And I think you've kind of touched on it, James, but Vicky as well, because obviously talking about how much you've enjoyed working in a shared space together. When you're thinking about your technology needs now, and in terms of what you're doing at the moment, are you envisaging you're going to change back very much, or do you think you're going to evolve upon the process that you've had to continue to work in a similar way to the way you've established during the pandemic?
Yeah, I think we'll adapt what we've sort of created during the pandemic to work with a sort of hybrid model once things do get back to normal. I can definitely see there being like a 2-3 day split from working from home in the office. I think all those our Discord automation things we would keep, the way we handle our source control and stuff we would keep. I think it would just be a matter of adapting it back to the way things were.
Yeah, so there's going to be that process of flicking back a little bit, but as you say, I think it's going to be a hard world to see where everyone's going to be in all the time anymore. I think it's going to be difficult to shift back, especially with it probably just taking a bit of time to get back to that kind of normality as well.
Also, I do miss having a separate workspace as well, because it's sort of like spend all day looking at good screen, or just spend all day looking at bad screen, time for good screen. Just
Yes,
in the same
exactly.
chair.
Exactly. I have good screen in the living room, bad screen is in this room. And then what I do as well is that I have a laptop, which obviously I'm running through a second screen through work. I have to now take my laptop, close it, put it in a bag, and then put my good laptop in, so my bad screen becomes my neutral screen. Anyway, I think I'm getting sidetracked. In terms of essential tech, though, and in terms of thinking a little bit for the future as well, obviously one of the key things about making games is that it evolves all of the time, and the technology that is used to make it evolves all the time. Are there any developments in terms of technology that you've been using where you think this is going to be a big deal now, or maybe sort of even more so in the future? James?
So I think one piece of tech that has been popping up this past kind of 18 months, I saw it a little bit when we were at CCP. We looked at it again at Sharkmob. There's a piece of technology called Parsec, which is looking to improve remote desktoping. So traditionally, I think remote desktoping was very difficult for artists in particular, where you're kind of sat there with your Cintiq, and then you kind of this kind of major turnaround time when you want it to feel quite high fidelity when your pen is on a paper. And solutions like Parsec are looking to solve some of these issues, which I think is going to be necessary if we do move to a fully remote kind of way of working for certain people in the industry. I am looking forward to having Star Trek level holograms, so I can feel like I'm sat in a room with other human beings. I miss going to the pub, so as soon as I can do that again, even remotely, it will make me feel good. So I'm hoping to get some of that in the future. I think we're also, given where I'm seeing I think online gaming in general is just becoming increasingly popular and increasingly common, and I think it's still a kind of a reasonable barrier to entry for a lot of game developers. It's harder to build online games than it is to build single player games, and it's getting easier. And there's a lot of tech in development at the moment to try and make out of the box multiplayer kind of easier for small scale developers, particularly kind of large scale multiplayer. I still think there's a long way to go for all these technologies, but I think we're going to continue to see a lot of experimentation in that space to try and almost get to the point where building an online product is as easy as it is to load up Unreal and make a kind of a traditionally single player experience. That's outside of the COVID world, just tech in general.
Of course. And Vicky as well? What
yeah, the really good point about Parsec, I would say Parsec is to TeamViewer what Discord was to Slack. It's that kind of game focused, they know their audience, they know their niche, they know exactly what type of power and quality people are looking for. As well as that, just general increase of just more accessibility to sort of cloud machine learning and analytics for indies. At the minute, that seems very much like a larger studio thing, but I think those tools will become more accessible as time goes on.
Fantastic. And then, I think actually, we've still got a little bit of time. I have got a question. It's not strictly on the essential tech point, but I think we can kind of wrap it in because I think it may actually sort of talk about the importance of it as well. So we got a question from Phil Carlisle, who's thinking that, remote working seems to be kind of natural. Do you think it's going to be a feature of recruitment for companies in the future? And then the question that I was going to ask in relation to the technology is, how important do you think it's going to be to make sure that when you're bringing in those hires, that they're really aware of exactly what you're working on? Because presumably onboarding is not quite the same, right? When everyone's at home. Is that the case, James, especially in your position as someone who's growing a studio rapidly, to say the least?
So I think it largely depends on the kind of games you're making and the culture you want to build for your studio. I think we're going to, my belief is over the next few years, we're going to see a split between what different developers want. Some people want remote working. Some people really miss the studio life and want to be in the studio. It can be a challenge to build good processes to accommodate both at the same time, particularly when you're much larger. So I think it will become part of the recruitment strategy for certain studios and probably quite a lot of studios. For others, it won't. And the fact that it's not will be appealing to a certain kind of crowd in the dev community. I believe almost every company, if not all companies, will take a serious look at their flexible working policies with regards to hours, allowing people to be in and out of the studio kind of around the lifestyle that fits them. But when it comes to things like, would you hire somebody working overseas or kind of in a location that's not able to get into your building on a regular basis. I think that's going to be dependent on the developer and how you want to build your team and your community and who you want to onboard and all those kind of things.
Yeah. And Vicky?
Yeah, definitely. I think 4-day work weeks, just in terms of what you were saying there, James, about flexibility and stuff. I think if people were to go fully remote, because we're sort of fully remote at the minute, and I'm very much trying to extend that weekend into 3 days, so that it seems like there's at least some separation between the working and the, you know, working from home and being at home. So I think the flexible working stuff will be a big thing going forward as well.
Fantastic. And then just to round things off, just one final opportunity. Have you got any tips for people? Just one final little rounding off comment in relation to their tech needs. If you were going to give them one piece of advice, James and Vicky, what would it be?
I've been using open source language plugin for Unity translations called Polyglot, and it's like a sheet of pre-translated stuff, and then you can get crowdsourced localizations on Localizer as well. I find this to be a great stopgap in between actually getting your proper localizations done and doing something crowdsourced for free in Unity. So that's something I found most useful last month.
Fantastic. And James?
So I think, particularly given where we are right now with the pandemic going on around us, so I'm a big believer in the culture of your company is in many ways more important than the tech of your company in terms of company success. And I think that's heavily tied to technology right now, because as Vicky was saying, with certain technologies, you can do things like the Discord coffee sessions and things like that. So I'd encourage any company who is, well, everybody's working from home right now, but particularly if you're going through growth phases, you're kind of changing your dynamic or anything like that, look for technologies and ways of using technologies that can really help your team stay close and communicate well and feel like they're getting that social interaction that we just don't have in the office space at the moment. Because I think more than anything, that is going to be crucial to getting through this next year and then transitioning into whatever the future of work life looks like.
Yeah, we do Scriblio coffee breaks, like a drawing game. So.
Fantastic. And my only piece of advice on essential tech is just download voice mod when you're using Discord, because that's jolly good fun. It's like, if you really want to mess people up when you're having a Discord chat, put that on and then put on the magic chords. It's a great use of the virtual.
I think me and Vicky are both Googling that now.
Yeah, I think
yeah.
look, I will leave you two to Google it. Thank you so